In this video we take a look at Soviet pillboxes and German instructions on how to deal with them, especially for artillery and combat engineers. The fortifications in question are concrete pillboxes from the Molotov and Stalin line. The information is mostly based on a German report from January 1942. First off, some context information about the Stalin and Molotov lines. Although designated as a line, the Stalin line was more like several areas of fortified regions between the Gulf of Finland in the north and the Black Sea in the south, along the Soviet border at this time. It was constructed in 3 stages, in 1928, the early 1930s, and finally 1938. However, some parts of it were not finished by 1941, when resources were diverted from it to the Molotov line, at which we look next. Since after the fall of Poland and the annexation of the Baltic states, the Soviet border had moved further west. The construction of the Molotov line started in 1940, about 320 kilometers west of the Stalin line. Rather than one continuous line, the Molotov line consists of a number of fortified regions which were anything from 50 to 120 kilometers in length. It was started in 1940 and suspended in winter of 1940 before recommencing in 1941. Although the chief of the Soviet Generalstab suggested to put the defensive further away from the border, Stalin wanted them to be close to the border. However, the Winter War underlined the strength of fortifications. Yet the German success in France 1940 cast serious doubts on their effectiveness. The value of the new border defenses was called into further question by a wargame in January 1941 between General Zhukov, then commander of the Kiev Special Military District, and Colonel General Pavlov, the commander of the Western Special Military District, which demonstrated the folly of building the fortifications along the vast winding frontier. Zhukov was able to thrust deep into Belorussia, and he argued that part of the reason for this was the thin band of fortifications around the Bialystok salient. These failed to adequately protect the troops positioned there, leaving them vulnerable to encirclement. Although the months before the invasion, substantial resources were put into the construction, the line was far from finished when the Wehrmacht attacked in June 1941. About 2,300 strongpoints had been finished, yet most of them were only armed with machine guns. Probably worse, the positions were not integrated with each other, sometimes lacking communication links, camouflage, minefields, and obstacles. Now, let us look at the German report, which makes some general observations that underline that the lines were not finished. The facilities are often unfinished. It happens that weapons and internal weapon installations are present, while the outer earth filling is still missing. Unfinished installations are surrounded by 2.5 meters of high scrubbery screens. Attention, the enemy also fights from these positions. It is further noted that the concrete pillboxes and fortifications are very similar to other medium-strength defensive structures of other nations. As such, the German troops should be able to deal with them with their existing weapons. Although it is particularly noted, the usually tenacious will of the Russian crew to resist must be given special consideration. This statement is in line with other German reports I read over the years. For instance, an intelligence officer of an infantry division in 1941 noting that the Soviets' attacks are generally a disaster, while noting that in the defense the Soviet soldiers are extremely tenacious. The report continues, noting 3 types of pillboxes that are common. A. Concrete loophole pillboxes for one-side flanking, as you can see here. B. Pillboxes with 2-side flanking. C. Pillboxes for frontal defenses. In terms of arrangement, it is in line with the previous statements that defenses were not properly integrated when the Germans attacked in summer 1941. The positions are often so far apart that they do not provide effective mutual fire support. However, they are also grouped together, sometimes with passage connections. The construction is rarely single level, mostly 2 or 3 levels. The upper level with the fighting rooms protrude to 3.5 meters above the ground. In terms of reinforced concrete steel strength, it is noted that the maximum so far encountered was 2 meters or 6.6 feet in thickness. The following thicknesses are noted. For roofs, 1.3 to 2 meters, frontal walls 1.5 to 2 meters, loophole walls 1.2 to 2 meters, rear walls 1 to 2 meters, ceilings and inner walls 0.2 to 0.75 meters. The concrete was stronger on the outside than the inside, which likely refers to the density of rebars used. The concrete quality is also noted as being of very high quality, but not particularly resilient. About armaments, it is stated the loopholes are either equipped with a heavy machine gun or a 45mm anti-tank gun. The latter is always combined with a heavy machine gun that fires from the same loophole. Additionally, sometimes there were also 76mm guns. The weapons were generally fitted in ball mounts. Be aware that the heavy machine gun in German doctrine was not dependent on the caliber, but if the machine gun was equipped with mountings and sights to engage at long ranges. Generally, the machine guns used in these fortifications were 7.62mm Maxim NTPs. About gas protection, it is noted, the Russians were aiming for gas safety in the positions, but this is rarely achieved due to the unfinished nature of the positions. The same applies to ventilation. Vane hand pumps are provided for this purpose, which can also be operated electrically. This is again in line from what we know. In April 1941, Zhukov also ordered that the fortifications of the Molotov line should be equipped with whatever weapons were at hand and that armored doors to be fitted to protect their crews. This was to take priority over work to install communication links, power, and efforts to protect the shelters against gas attack. It is further noted that the entrances have defensive nature like loopholes for submachine guns and pipes for hand grenades. Similarly, most fortifications have emergency exits. Fortifications that do not have entrances are connected with corridors to other fortifications. Some fortifications use protruding roofs. Particularly interesting is that the floors were not connected via stairs but ladders and access hatches. So let us take a look at the most common fortifications. First, we have a pillbox with a 45mm gun and 2 machine guns. This was used for flanking, so the enemy would be coming from here, while the guns were positioned at a 90-degree angle. Its height above ground was 3.5 meters, that is about 11.5 feet. Only the top level was above ground. The lower level was below the ground. So let's take a look at those. Between the two combat rooms, there was a ventilation opening. The combat room with the 45mm gun was connected to a hub that connected the upper floor areas and the lower floor in roughly the center of the structure. Behind it was a gas lock that led to the entrance. It could be engaged from the hub and the combat room for the machine gun. The small slit at the other side of the entrance was to deflect shockwaves. Left to the hub was the ammo room, and behind it another one. The lower floor contained the living areas. On the left was the resting place, the lower floor hub connected to the toilet, and the ventilation room. The latter was connected to the ready room that was below the combat room with the 45mm gun. A look from the side shows the emergency exit. Note that the length of the corridor is not according to scale. It was about 50 meters long, so about 164 feet. A variant of the previous type was the following. It had an additional machine gun position that was at a 90-degree angle to the other two loopholes. Here you can see the lines of fire. The firing arcs were 50 degrees according to the German diagrams. Again, this pillbox would be placed so that it would flank the enemy. Here you can see 2 pillboxes next to the height, and further behind was the command post. The next fortification was far more straightforward in its design and positioning. It had a hexagonal shape with 3 machine guns that were all directed towards the front line. The first 3 rooms were combat rooms with machine guns. Next to the loopholes were pipes for dropping hand grenades. The left and center combat rooms connected to the hub. They contained a duct connecting to the lower floor. The hub also connected to the gas lock, which connected to a hallway that connected to the entrance. The room behind the right combat room was the observation room that contained a periscope to the roof. In the lower floor, there was 1 room for ammo, 2 ready rooms, 1 room with a valve, 2 small rooms, of which 1 was connected to the emergency exit. The pillbox had an overall width of 13.2 meters, 43.3 feet, while a small rear side had about 4.5 meters, 14.8 feet. It had a crew of 18 men. In the German report, the section about engaging the fortifications noted that due to a lack of well-interconnected defenses, the most can be bypassed and engaged from the rear. The general guidelines for artillery and combat engineers are provided. For artillery, it is stated to determine if the pillbox is protected by a bursting layer or not. The target should be the front walls, not the roofs. Firing at a loophole is still effective. The guns should be moved as closely to the pillboxes as it allowed by the cover and the stability of the guns. The aim point should be at least 2 meters, 6.6 feet below the top, else no hollow areas can be hit. It is particularly noted that not spending enough ammunition can be detrimental to success. For ammunition, it is noted that only anti-concrete and anti-tank ammunition should be used. It is particularly noted that high explosive ammo is useless since not even a moral effect can be expected from it. Finally, it is noted that 3 guns so far have been particularly effective, namely the 21 cm heavy howitzer, the 15 cm heavy howitzer, and the 10 cm cannon. Be aware that the first gun was called Mörser, mortar, by the Germans during the war. For attacking combat engineers, several aspects are noted. The first is, in the event of a close quarters attack, part of the crew often tries to leave the position and engage the attacker from the terrain. It is necessary to secure all entrances and emergency exits during the close quarters attack. Since emergency exits set away from the structure are difficult to recognize, the entire area surrounding the installation must be carefully monitored. The second point notes that crews of multi-level pillboxes often leave the upper floor if those are engaged and later return to continue to fight. The third point is about forcing the crew out of the upper floor by using satchel charges, hand grenades, smoke, flame oil, or similar measures. The cover of the periscope opening can be lifted or must be blown up. If a hole in the roof is not available, it is necessary to use the entrance while being cautious about openings for hand grenades. Fourth, demolition charges on loopholes have limited effect if they have too much distance to the loopholes. This is particularly an issue if they are used on roofs. Weapons in ball mounts can be made ineffective with 10 kg charges, which is about 20 pounds. Fifth, hollow charges are ineffective against concrete roofs and walls. Sixth, if the crew has evaded to the lower floors, they are killed by detonating large concentrated charges, 100 to 150 kg, about 200 to 300 pounds, preferably inside the upper floor. The usually weak partition walls and ceilings favor the effect. Detonating in front of the entrance has an imperfect effect. To summarize, the Soviets constructed 2 defensive lines. The Stalin Line was situated along the Soviet western border of summer 1939, whereas the Molotov Line was along parts of the border between Germany and the Soviet Union after the fall of Poland and the annexation of the Baltic states in summer 1940. The Soviet pillboxes were, according to German assessments, regular and comparable to other countries. One main issue with both lines was that the fortifications were not complete when the Germans attacked. Thanks to Budja Freimann for answering various fortification questions. Thanks to Andrew for reviewing the script. Thank you for watching and see you next time.